Sure. Adventure awaits. I mean, people who are going there, I'm pretty sure, were going for the adventure, weren't they? There's something happening there. Let's go and see what's happening. So it kind of fits, doesn't it? I've called it Adventure Awaits. There's Kermit, my mate. Let me explain a little bit why that's there. So the summer before last, we took our Rise youth group to DTI, an event at Trent Vineyard. It was a weekend, and we kind of got to go to meetings, and our young people got to worship Jesus and hear some great preachers. And we actually got to spend a lot of time together. And one of the things we did, we went to Highfields Park at the university, and we got to go on boats. The lads, me, Danny, Ellie, we were on one boat. We were good, weren't we? We were plain sailing. We went one end of the lake to the other. The other boat was full of 6 of our teenage girls. I am not going to make a comment about gender here, but one of the boats was more stable than the other. By that I mean that we were constantly waiting at the next checkpoint while their boat either reached us or turned to face the right way. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an amazing sailor, but our boat, or the boys' boat, let's say, they had someone leading it, and I think it was kind of obvious that there was someone who had a plan who the boys all listened to, the kids listened to, and we got where we wanted to go. It turns out it helps having someone who knows what they're doing. The last few weeks, the preachers have kind of been on different topics, but there's been some common threads throughout, certainly that I've picked up. So we had John Fahey talking about being obedient for the adventure. Rachel, I mean, you touched on several things, Rachel, but there was definitely an element of waiting is good, but don't wait too long. Sometimes we need to go. And John Pettifer last week talked about courageous Christianity. There's certainly an outward-looking approach. We're looking forward at the minute, and I absolutely feel the same way. Because the Bible gives us teaching on many things, and one of them is preparing for the promise of what's to come. So, we're going to chart a course this morning. Like sailors, I thought, and I'll explain why we've gone for a sailor theme. It was Wednesday, a week and a half ago. There was a power cut. If you live in Arnold, you might not have noticed because it was the middle of the night or it was early morning. And I tell you how I know, because the kids came into our room worrying. Their digital clocks aren't working. Jo, being the amazing mother, straight into action. She's found out, it's a power cut. It's okay, kids. She's calming them down. Me, I'm bleary-eyed and confused as to what's going on. My response was, the power's off, which means it's dark. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. It's allowed to be dark at this time. Go back to bed. God used that point to kick my brain into gear. So I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, trying to kind of wrestle with this a little bit. And again, we've given it a nautical theme. I blame the early morning hysteria, but maybe it works. All aboard. Adventure awaits. The next slide, please, Julian. I think part of it is the next 2 slides are exactly the same. So if you go one more, I like the bubbles more. So we're going to go for that one. And again, Romans 12, that's kind of our base this morning, but not really. We're going to kind of move around the Bible. Why? I'll explain at the end why, but hey, it's always a good place to start. Romans 12, verse 12, the NLT says, rejoice in our confident hope, be patient in trouble, and keep on praying. The Message says this is 11 to 13, don't burn out, keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Be alert servants of the master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times. Pray all the harder. Help needy Christians. Be inventive in hospitality. This is so important. I think both versions are important when we're considering the future. Another thing I try to do in every single preach is not go to my favourite verse in the Bible. Now, we've all got verses that we like, and typically, if we're being honest, it's either the ones that we can remember. That's certainly me, or because they've got some special meaning. I definitely have both of these. This is the one I remember, and also, so the next slide, please, Julian, I'm sure we know it, Jeremiah 29. And if we're talking about plans in the future, it makes sense. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. To use the sailing theme that we're doing this morning, I wish I had a captain's hat. We need to set a new destination for our vessel. We're on a boat, we're sailing through life. I don't mean the plain sailing word that me and the teenage lads had, because that's linked to an ease. And life is not easy. It's certainly not plain sailing. So, to link to what Rachel said a few weeks ago, boats can be anchored at harbour. They restock supplies, they get fixed up, they get mended, they get all the holes, all the bits of old wood are taken out, new wood is put in. It's so important that boats do that. But they're also designed to go out to the next thing. A boat needs to do both of these. And we're the same. There's times when we need to be docked, recharged, be built up, deal with what's going on, and then we set a course and we head out. Next one, please, Julian. So, there's typically in the world two extreme views of thinking. Some would say there's this element of luck, that we fall into everything we do. The Guardian had an article from this philosopher, Galen Strawson, who kind of went into depth about how everything we do is luck. And he starts off with our circumstance, okay, what we're born into, our genetic identity, fine. But then he was saying, even our life achievements, everything that we do in life is complete luck. And by this logic, is there any point in thinking about what's next? Because we're going to stumble into it either way, with no control. That's important. Whereas the other extreme that the world will say is, no, there's destiny and it leads our path. Destiny has already decided. The idea of fate, everything in life, in your life, is written out ahead of you. But again, you've got no control because it's already there. Whatever you do, already decided. It's a similar scenario. There's no point in planning. There's no point in charting a course because everything's decided. And when I think about those two ideals, I'm not sure I like either of those extremes. In our house, especially at dinner time, we've started playing Would You Rather questions. This is very much Jo, youth leader's head on. She's very good at these. And she's very good, I'll big up Jo, at the weird and wonderful ones, such as, would you rather have hot dogs for fingers or feet for hands? You know, that kind of thing. Would you rather have bees in your ears or spiders in your armpits? That sort of thing. The kids love them, as you can imagine. They've actually got quite good at them, although theirs usually end up as, which superpower would you like? And that's nice, because either way I gain something. So, typical dad, I try and make mine a little bit more thinky. Should we try one this morning? Okay, really simple. Here's mine. I've asked this a few times. Would you rather have £1 million? I've already got you here, by the way. It's a nice one. Or the knowledge to be able to completely fix or restore any piece of technology or machinery. So I'll say it again, £1 million, or the knowledge, you'll never lose this knowledge of how to fix anything, basically, and completely restore it. You'd have the knowledge to do it. What do you reckon? Who'd pick the money? Yeah, good. Do you know what? First few times I asked it was always money. Who'd have the knowledge? That's what I'd go for as well. Who's not sure? There's a few. There's always we have to do that. And again, the teacher and me, I'm allowed to. You can sit on the fence, mainly because I'm not going to give you £1 million. I don't have that. My thinking is money's finite. I know £1 million, that can go a long way, but it's still finite, whereas knowledge goes with us. You can restore stuff. It's great, isn't it? What's the point? It's this. The way I see it, the way the Bible sees it, it's not an either or. It's not a would you rather. It says this: God is always with us, guiding us, but he lets us lead the way. Psalm 139. What a long but wonderful psalm. I'm just going to read the first 6 verses. O Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do. You know what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. God knows all. And he holds us and everything else in his hand. He goes before us, knowing where we're going to go. But isn't it beautiful how we have a choice in this? We choose where we're going. We choose the direction. We head on out. One of the great things The real privilege actually is when you get to when you do these talks or lead services, sometimes people will come and you get to listen to what's going on and you get to pray. So last time I did this, I did a little bit of where are we going? What's next? What's the plan? And a few people, and I won't share who, but a few people came and sort of said, I've got a big decision coming up and I'd appreciate if we prayed for it. And we pray for it and we go away. And it's not often that we get to check in again. So just for those people, just know that actually when I was writing this the last week and a half, I've had you in my prayers again and my thoughts, because it's really important that we know that we are praying for each other, whatever the situation is. A boat is made to float on water. If it doesn't have a destination, it is aimlessly floating, and eventually it will sink, it will run out of supplies, it might get run aground. It's not going to do what it's built to do. A boat needs a destination, somewhere to make landfall. The great thing is you hold the oars. You have the key to the motor if you want a nice modern boat. Some of you do, I know, and that's fine. Next slide, please. Proverbs 16:9 says, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. This gives me great comfort, because as much as I want that control of my life, as much as I want to be the one who holds the helm of the ship, I really have to know that God is right there next to me, ready to kind of like a driving instructor go, okay, I'll have it now. Just to kind of lead. As soon as I inevitably go astray, I know he's there to bring me back. And the way the message puts it underneath, we plan the way that we want to live, but only God makes us able to live it, which is great. Very helpful for me. Okay, we've left harbour, we're off. The inevitable worry, if you're on a boat and you're heading out to my destination, is, someone say sharks, wouldn't they? Storms. Being lost at sea. What if I don't know what to do when I've left the safety of harbour? Next one, please, Julian. So there's an amazing story of a guy called Stephen Callahan. Some of you might have heard the name, you might know the story, a lot of you won't. I'll explain. I mean, being lost at sea, it's a theme that's been covered by Hollywood loads, by TV series. But Stephen Callahan was a real life lost at sea story. See, he knew boats, so in 1981, he built his own boat and he sailed from the Caribbean to Europe. And he did it, across the Atlantic, no problem, brilliant. Spent a few weeks on holiday, started to sail back. Done it once. How hard can it be? Apparently a storm started to brew, but it was only mild, so he wasn't worried. Well, as you can imagine, the storm wasn't mild, and as soon as it started to rage, there was a hole that was made into the bottom of his boat. We don't know what it was, but he took on water. His boat was sinking. Now, thankfully for Stephen knowing boats, he had this inflatable raft and he grabbed anything he could. But this meant diving into water while his boat is sinking. The panic is there. At the end of it all, he had this inflatable raft. He managed to get food, to get water, to get flares. He got some handy items. He was well equipped. I'm not going to pretend he had nothing. He did have some stuff. But it was so important he did, because he drifted for 76 days. He nearly starved. He was dehydrated. There were shark attacks several times. He had to deal with raft punctures as well. Finally, somewhere in Guadeloupe, some sailors on the coast spotted him, brought him in. He'd lost a third of his weight. He couldn't stand, but he made a full recovery. The reason it's amazing is that we went to see The Life of Pi, 10 years ago now, the movie that came out. He was the advisor on set, because this amazing movie about that. He's the guy they got in because he'd lived it. His story can be shared. The prospect of storms is likely when sailing. As much as the adventure and the beauty of the ocean is, we know there's perils as well. So is it enough to stop the trip? That's the question we've got to ask ourselves. We're promised in the Bible, and it's sometimes hard to read, we're promised of trials and tribulations in life, but we're also assured of several truths. That we're not alone. We just read in Psalm 139, you go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. So important to say that to yourself sometimes. You're not alone, no matter how lost at sea you feel. We're made stronger. We're built up as a result of these. It says in 1 Corinthians 15, "So, my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and immovable. Always work enthusiastically for the Lord, for you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless." The great thing about that in 1 Corinthians is that that's Paul writing that. He definitely knew about sailing and facing trials, both nautical and spiritual. I'm not sure I trust his boat skills. He was shipwrecked 3 times. But I definitely trust his spiritual. That last line has stuck with me for the last week and a half, and it will for a long time. Nothing that I do for the Lord is ever useless. Repeat that to yourself this morning. And the last one, that our foundation is secure if it's made of the right stuff. Matthew 7, this is what Jesus was saying, a very famous story. "Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds his house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rain and the floods come, the winds beat the house, it collapses with a mighty crash." It's not just a fun story for our Eagles kids and our explorers. It's so important we know what our life is built on. It also works because there's a storm happening in that story as well, a bit what we're talking about. Next one, please, Julian. There's 2 questions I had here, and I was thinking about this. Are you heading for a storm right now? That idea that it's on the horizon. Are you in choppy waters right now? It can feel like we're stuck. And I know I stand here, and this is very easy to say, but it is still a timely reminder. It's not because of you. It's not because you're a rubbish sailor. It's not because you don't know how to lead your own life. We're in a world of storms. And Jesus said in John 16, verse 33, "I've said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I've overcome the world." Not I will overcome the world, but not yet. Just deal with that storm on your own. I have already done this. Which is amazing. We're going to have tribulations. I made a little anecdote, and I kind of got rid of it, about how sometimes these tribulations are caused by others, and there was a comparison to pirates. That seemed too easy. A bit on the nose, I think. But also I thought, actually, I'm not going to make light of the damage that we do to each other. That humans can cause such permanent and lasting damage. So sometimes it's not just these otherworldly spiritual battle that we talk about. Sometimes it's done by other people. Sometimes it's by their actions or their words. I go back to Romans 12. Romans 12 to 15, the bit I was looking at, it shows us very simply that God is not satisfied with simply forgiving our sin. That's the start, but he wants to completely transform our lives. So in Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 15, the bit before I just read about how nothing we do is useless. Just before that, verse 45 to 49, Paul says this. He says, "The scriptures tell us the first man, Adam, became a living person. But the last Adam, that is Christ, is a life-giving spirit. What comes first is the natural body, then the spiritual body comes later. Adam, the first man, was made from the dust of the earth, while Christ, the second man, came from heaven. Earthly people are like the earthly man, and heavenly people are like the heavenly man. Just as we are now like the earthly man, we will someday be like the heavenly man." We're humans like Adam. That's why we're on the earth, facing tribulations, facing trials. Yet we are being transformed to look like Jesus. It's a promise to us. We no longer mirror Adam, but Jesus. But that makes it sound like Jesus didn't face trials. But let's look at Jesus, the man, because that's how we live now as humans. I go back to Romans 12. Jesus did 3 things when he faced trials. He had a confident hope, he was patient in trouble, and he continually prayed. 3 things I'm going to try and do. I'm coming near the end now, but when I was a teenager, I was, next one please, Julian, I was fortunate enough to go on a cruise ship. When I was a teenager, the long story short, my gran managed to sign up for one of these timeshare things. What it meant is we had to go to Florida. I say had to. What a hard thing. We had to go to Florida, and she sat with my granddad for a whole day being convinced to buy a timeshare, which she didn't do. What it meant is the family got to go to Florida for really cheap. And just to get them out there, they also chucked in this cruise for 3 days to the Bahamas. Ooh, I hear you say. I don't want to sound, I don't know what the word is. It was a big waste of time. And I say that, and I explain why. We were on the Bahamas for 4 hours. We were on land, and it rained for 4 hours. But not like a beautiful rain, Bahamas rain. No, British rain. It was grey and overcast the whole time. I do have a cherished memory from that cruise. The first night, we were out on the front deck. There were lights, and one of the captains, I think, probably came out and said, look, we're going to turn the lights off on front deck, so just find somewhere to stand or to sit. So we did, and teenage me is not really sure what's going on, and they turned the lights off. Now, as you can imagine, you're in the middle of the ocean. All the lights have been turned off on the front deck. It is ridiculously dark. And then you look up. I saw a tapestry of wonder and colour. I cannot get that image out of my head. I mean, this doesn't even really do it justice. That haze, the Milky Way, apparently. I saw there was a guy with us who knew constellations, who was pointing out the different planets and things that we saw, and there was shooting stars flying across the sky. It was incredible. There was a teenage me still trying to work himself out, who in that moment saw the majesty and the nature of our Creator. And I went off in a little bit, this was about 7:30 in the morning, of like finding out about space. Because I can put some space facts in here. There's someone who likes space, that would be great. And actually I've kind of got rid of a load of stuff. Like there's things like, I was thinking that there's more stars in the nights, in the sky, in space than grains of sand on Earth. Isn't that incredible? Yeah, I know the Creator. Our sun this is what scientists say, our sun is one of the smallest stars, and you can fit 1 million Earths inside it. And yet, God cared about me enough to create me. If you're feeling insignificant this morning, you are a beautiful and wonderful creation. How incredible is that? I've been reading a book recently by a guy called Andrew Wilson. It's called Incomparable. Really, really easy to read paragraph. I'm not kind of plugging it. I've had this book for a long time, but I picked it up again because I remember reading it a long time ago thinking, and I'm not going to pretend to be someone who reads lots of books. I don't. I read lots of information, like a lot of us, laptops, phones and things, but this book was one that he gave to me a while ago, and it's lots of easy chunks to read. And one of the things he was saying really early on that really stuck with me that I wanted to share is that one of the things we can wrestle with is when we're at sea, lost, alone, the storm's coming, we're in the storm, I'm not sure what my destination is. The question is, I am on my own though, aren't I? You say that he's with me, and we've read those amazing things. We turn to the Bible. Do you know the one thing you probably won't find is anyone trying to convince you that God exists? And what he says in the book is, he said, it's like going to a maths textbook and reading them explaining that 1 + 1 = 2. You won't find it. Because the Bible writers never present that argument because it's so obvious. And in fact, when I was looking at the space facts, I was on BBC's Sky at Night. Marcus Chown, the guy there, is writing the facts. He studies science, a scientist. He believes in scientific logic and fact. And yet when there's that question thrown at him of, well, how do we know this? How do you know all that about space? It's scientific fact, he says. And he uses the words, there's no real explainable alternative. As in, well, the majority think it, so do I. There's a lot of instances in history where the majority view was very wrong. And it doesn't explain, that flawed and small logic cannot explain the nature, the beauty, the miracles. It cannot explain how our existence was just pure chance. It can't be. You look at nature and you see how wonderful and beautiful it is and think there is a creator. And they cannot prove there wasn't. The same way that they try and prove everything else. So I looked at the sky as a teenager. I looked at the beauties of the heavens, the unknown, and I thanked God for it. This teenage me Small and insignificant, and yet so incredibly important somehow. Band, as you come and find all your members from Eagles Kids. Let's return to Romans 12 just while they're coming up. So as I was writing this, it started out as a really silly idea of a ship. And I thought, it started off with me thinking, do I bring like an inflatable dinghy and sit in it? Try and be entertaining, try and be interesting to listen to on a Sunday morning. And then it kind of blew out of proportion as God just catches us in these moments. So I've tried to be coherent and tried in places, I'm sure. What's my prayer for us this morning and for myself? Well, first of all, that there'd be something in here that's touched you. Something in here that you've latched onto and thought, that was good. But I'll also finish with a bit of an honest acknowledgement. That there have been times the past weeks and months where I felt particularly low. And I can't explain why. I felt a bit lost at times, or I felt empty. Sometimes we can put our finger on things straight away and go, well, that's why. But actually, it's not that simple sometimes. And I know some of you will know that feeling. And the way I'd put it was that joy was hard to come by. I felt it was a great thing that Rachel said a few weeks ago. I keep coming back to yours, Rachel, because it was a good one. We can suffer emotional fatigue sometimes. This idea that I'm running empty here. And actually reading Romans 12, whether it has been the right verse to choose as our starting point and our end point, I thought it doesn't matter, because it meant a lot to me these last weeks, and hopefully it means a lot to you. So I'm just going to read Romans 12, 11 to 13 one more time. Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled and aflame. Get yourself docked in harbour at points with people who are going to build you up. They're going to fix you up with the Creator. Be alert servants of the Master, cheerfully expectant, but don't wait too long. You don't live in harbour. You're built to be out there. Don't quit in hard times. Just pray all the harder. When you hit that adversity, you're built to get through it. And you've got someone next to you at the helm who's steering you, and he'll take over as soon as you say it. Help needy Christians. Be inventive in hospitality. I figured we'd run long enough at this point, but this is something that absolutely we can be doing right now. Here's our close. Help needy Christians. Well, right now, brothers and sisters, you are all those people to me. So that's the aim for the rest of the morning. We're going to worship the King, whoever he is to you, those names we sung about this morning, whatever he is to you, whether he's a way maker, whether he's a promise keeper, whether he fixes your heart up this morning. Let's have our eyes on each other as well, a little bit. And I think as I've struggled the last little while, I needed to make sure the fuel I was taking on was from God, not some cheap knockoff that the world offers. I need to pray. I need to trust in God to fix me up and get me seaworthy again. So as I close, let's do that. The band are gonna play, and I kind of want them to just jump straight into it. If you're able to, let's respond. If it's standing, please stand while the band play. If it's sitting for the first little bit, please feel free, and then we'll see where we go from there.